Across all sports, fans love to argue over who the greatest of all time is. The Messi versus Ronaldo debate has raged between supporters of the two for over a decade. Michael Jordan and LeBron James get compared to one another all the time. But in hockey, and in the NHL, things are different. Those arguments don't really exist. There isn't any real debate. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. When people think hockey, they think Wayne Gretzky. Over the course of his legendary career, Gretzky became synonymous with the sport. He dominated for decades on different teams, markets, and leagues, both domestically and internationally. Wayne Gretzky was an absolute superstar throughout the entirety of his career and left the game the biggest celebrity to ever play the sport. Today, let's take a look at why exactly his legendary status is so unshakable. Why Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. Wayne Gretzky's reputation shines as bright off the ice as the star did on it. He's by far the most well-known hockey player to play the sport even still, 25 years after his final season. If you were to ask casual fans to name a hockey player, they would probably still name Gretzky in their first few. In part, that's because the NHL and their stars seem to have no interest in marketing themselves, but it's also because of the many ways Gretzky integrated himself into the public limelight throughout his playing days. He made various talk show and public appearances, playing much of his career in Los Angeles and New York. He's had moments and quotes famous enough to completely transcend the sport of hockey. And even after retiring, he's remained active in hockey with management roles for years, before entering back into the limelight with a role on TNT's hockey panel in 2021. All of this builds on the legacy of Wayne Gretzky, if not as an NHL legend, then as a figure and ambassador for the sport. None of the things he took on off the ice, fame, celebrity, responsibility, are given to someone who is just in the NHL or even a good player. To be important enough to earn the roles he has, you have to be truly great. Wayne Gretzky earned the nickname the Great One at only 10 years old, a moniker which would follow him throughout his entire career. At 10, he scored 378 goals in just one season. By 13, he was credited with over 1,000 goals in minor hockey. What's interesting is, even being so dominant at such a young age, Gretzky never really stood out as an exceptional athlete. It wasn't being otherworldly at any one obvious skill that made him so good. What made him stand out at that age is the same trait that made him stand out in the OMJHL, WHA, and eventually NHL levels: his incredible vision and hockey IQ. Maybe his most famous directly hockey-related quote serves as a great explanation of why Gretzky was so good. He went to where the puck was going to be, and if you always know where that is, you can read the game seconds before everyone else. This skill, this way of reading the game on a level to which no one else ever has, allowed for so much chance creation and goal scoring. Gretzky created goals at a level so far above anyone in NHL history, largely because of his incredible hockey IQ. He could pick out anyone on the ice in any situation. He knew where his teammates were at all times and could always set something into motion to get them open. Gretzky also saw through defensive systems of the time, popularizing playing from behind the opposition's net. That space became known as Gretzky's office, a place from which he'd often dictate the game. Oftentimes, once Gretzky got into that spot, there really wasn't any way to stop him. He was too shifty, too quick, and too smart. No doubt Gretzky's play from this area led to the popularization of offense running from behind the net over the years and was a huge influence on the modern game. Gretzky himself wasn't ever hitting Michigans, but he began to change how people perceived certain areas of the ice. Wayne Gretzky was always thinking ahead, whether it be seconds before anyone else in key moments or years before anyone else in terms of dictating a team's offensive strategy. It's why he was such an incredible offensive play driver and why he's so renowned as a passer and playmaker. Pretty much every assist-related record in the NHL belongs to Wayne Gretzky. Most assists in a game, most assists in a season, highest assists per game in a season, highest assists per game in a career, most assists in a playoff career. He even ranks among the NHL's best All-Star Game careers. The most well-known and most impressive assist record, though, is the all-time NHL assist leader record, of which Gretzky is far, far, far clear of anyone else. A major goal-scoring record of his may be broken sometime in the near future, which we'll get to, but no one is even close to touching the assist king. The most well-known stat surrounding just how far ahead Gretzky is the fact that he has more assists than anyone else in NHL history has total points. To contextualize that, Jaromir Jagr, who played 246 more games than Gretzky, has 1,921 career points, the second most all time. Wayne Gretzky has 1,963 career assists. Ron Francis has the second most assists in NHL history with 1,249. If you were to add all of Daniel Alfredsson's assists, who ranks 55 all-time in the stat, to Francis's career tally, he still comes up one short of Gretzky. No one in NHL history had the playmaking traits at the level that Gretzky had them, and no one is likely to have them again for a very long time. No one is even close to Gretzky's career assist records, and it's all but guaranteed that nobody will threaten to even get within range for at least another 20 plus years, and possibly forever. What could be broken are his goal records. Wayne Gretzky isn't really perceived as a sniper or pure goal scorer. You wouldn't find his name on any lists of players with the best or hardest shots, and yet he's still in possession of many goal records, including being the number one goal scorer of all time in the NHL. This ties right back to his incredible IQ, his ability to be in the right spaces at the right times to score the right way. Make no mistake though, Gretzky did have an excellent shot. His slap shot specifically is recognizable for its power, accuracy, and the iconic moments in which he unleashed it. Because of how the NHL has evolved since he's played, Gretzky's drawn more and more criticism as to how good of a goal scorer he really was. The obvious point of contention that stands out is the skill level of the goalies involved. Goalies were smaller then, had smaller equipment, and rarely even went into butterfly. Take this clip of Gretzky, for example. He's able to freeze the goalie completely with a shot fake, to where the goalie falls over, and Gretzky basically shoots right through him. That goalie is Mike Vernon, a Conn Smythe Trophy winner and Vezina Trophy finalist. Watching some of the saves modern goalies are capable of making, it's hard to imagine any shooter getting a goal that easily. No disrespect to Vernon, but that version of him isn't doing this. The level of flexibility and pure athleticism of the average goalie today is on another planet when compared to just a few decades ago. Since Gretzky's played, the quality of goaltenders has risen much more than the quality of skaters has. Even still, it's not like goalies back then were just absolute garbage. It's just as easy to cherry-pick clips where modern-day goalies look bad. Goalies then were worse, sure, but it's not to the point where all of Gretzky's goals should be immediately discredited. The main reason Gretzky's goal scoring is getting called into question more recently is because of Alexander Ovechkin. Gretzky's 894 goal record once seemed completely out of reach. Gordie Howe had to play 26 NHL seasons to get 801 goals, and yet Gretzky ended his career with 93 more. As of 2 seasons ago, though, Howe isn't number 2 anymore. It's Ovechkin, who has 853 goals going into 2024-25 and is expected to finish the upcoming season just shy of the record. Ovechkin's looking likely to break Gretzky's record, despite playing against much tougher goaltenders and missing games and seasons due to league stoppages. Even with so much defensive improvement, Alexander Ovechkin is challenging Gretzky for the all-time record. So, is Gretzky really the most talented goalscorer of all time? Probably not. Still, let's not forget the level of goalscorer we're talking about here. The record may not belong to Gretzky in a few short seasons, but he still comfortably holds more scoring records than anyone else. Most goals in one period. 50 goals in 39 games. Most goals in a season. Most 50 or more and 60 or more goal seasons. Most playoff goals. Highest goals per game average in a modern era season. Gretzky is undoubtedly a top 3 goal scorer of all time, if not number 1, which in combination with his unrivaled playmaking abilities makes him the best pure offensive talent the NHL has ever seen by a country mile. What every NHL player will tell you, any elite professional athlete really, is that individual awards and success don't matter. They'll show some level of excitement for those things, but what really matters to them are championships. Fans reflect this feeling too. Players like Joe Thornton, Henrik Lundqvist, and Jarome Iginla, for example, are highly acclaimed. But when discussing these players, it's not long before it's brought up that they never won a cup. Wayne Gretzky didn't have to wait too long before winning his first Stanley Cup. He won plenty with the Edmonton Oilers, playing on one of the most iconic dynasties in NHL history. The Edmonton Oilers were a very young team when coming over from the WHA. Besides Gretzky, their inaugural season didn't offer too much excitement. By the second season, though, the young players had taken over, as 4 of Edmonton's top 5 scorers were 21 or younger. Over the next couple seasons, the young core formed around players such as Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Paul Coffey, Glenn Anderson, Kevin Lowe, Grant Fuhr, and of course, Wayne Gretzky. In 1983, the team broke through in the playoffs for the first time, reaching the finals before losing in a sweep to the New York Islanders. In 1984, the team won their first Stanley Cup. Their second-round series against the Calgary Flames was the only real close call, as the team was otherwise dominant in their championship pursuit. Gretzky led the team in playoff scoring, but the Conn Smythe went elsewhere. Mark Messier had developed into a dominant two-way force, a superstar in his own right, but also somebody that needed to eat up a bit more of the necessary responsibilities, while the Oilers had Gretzky run wild. His reward for taking on the tough role was playoff MVP. The Oilers won again next year, closing out with a playoff record of 15-3. They dominated the postseason, not losing until Game 3 of the third round. They scored 10-plus goals multiple times, and only scored fewer than 3 goals in 2 separate games. This season, Gretzky took home the Conn Smythe, after scoring 47 points in those 18 games. Many Oilers took over throughout that playoff run, but no one touched Gretzky, whose second championship and first Conn Smythe capped off what was essentially a flawless season. In 1986, the Calgary Flames got the better of Edmonton and broke up their cup-winning streak. But in 1987, the Oilers got right back to winning ways. You already know who led the Oilers in scoring, but again, the Conn Smythe didn't go to him. Actually, it didn't go to any Oilers player. For the fourth time in NHL history, the Conn Smythe Trophy went to a member of the losing team. The Philadelphia Flyers pushed the Oilers to 7 games, and Ron Hextall was given credit as the player who made it happen. Gretzky, after the series, called Hextall the best goalie he had ever played against. No doubt Hextall would have preferred to take home the championship, but the Conn Smythe served as a decent consolation prize for losing to the team that had just won their 3rd Stanley Cup in 4 seasons. The Oilers had officially become a dynasty, and even the best goalie in the world couldn't stop them. The next season, they claimed their 4th and 5, with a playoff record of 16-2, their most impressive run yet. Gretzky scored 43 points, with 13 points in 3 out of the 4 series. He won his 2nd Conn Smythe, but the excitement was short-lived. Unfortunately, this is where his Edmonton era came to a close. Oilers owner Peter Pocklington needed to raise money, and that combined with Gretzky's soon expiring contract and growing interest in Los Angeles as a destination led to the development of the biggest move in hockey history. It took $15 million in cash, worth nearly $40 million in today's money, and a 19-year-old 55-goal scorer, and Gretzky was an LA King. Wayne Gretzky went out an Edmonton legend, capturing a cup in 4 of the 9 NHL seasons he played in for the club. The Kings team that Gretzky arrived to in Los Angeles wasn't as talented as the Edmonton squad he left, but was still very good. His first year was home to the only season in NHL history where 2 players on the same team scored over 150 points in a season, those being Gretzky and Bernie Nichols. Despite playing with players of such talent, along with the likes of Luc Robitaille and Jari Kurri later on, the Gretzky-led Los Angeles Kings would never win a Stanley Cup. They were a playoff team nearly every season Gretzky played there, but often struggled to break past the second round of the playoffs. They did get very close one year, that being 1992-93. The Kings sort of snuck into the playoffs that year with an unimpressive record. That was in part due to Gretzky missing much of the season, leaving Robitaille and Kurri to take over much of the offensive responsibilities. He was back for the playoffs though, and would play in all 24 of LA's playoff games. In a Canadian revenge tour, the Kings went through the Flames, Canucks, and Maple Leafs before matching up against the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final. Gretzky's 7 points in the finals weren't enough to overcome an incredible performance from Patrick Roy and the Habs, as they took home the franchise's 24th Stanley Cup. That was as close as it ever got in LA, and 3 seasons later, Gretzky was moved to the St. Louis Blues. The following season began the final chapter in his career, as the beginning of the end started in New York. Wayne Gretzky only experienced 1 playoff run as a New York Ranger in his first season with the club. A 36-year-old Gretzky reunited with star teammates Mark Messier and Luc Robitaille and joined Brian Leetch and Mike Richter. The Rangers placed 4th in a strong Atlantic division, led by Gretzky's league-leading assist tally. Powered in large part by Gretzky, the Rangers were able to reach the 3rd round of the playoffs before they were defeated by the Philadelphia Flyers. That would be the last point in 99's career in which he had a legitimate shot at a 5th championship, and he retired from the NHL 2 seasons later. At every point in his career, Wayne Gretzky had incredible teammates. Throughout almost the entirety of his time in Edmonton, he was playing with one of the strongest squads of all time. 6 different players that played for Edmonton during Gretzky's time on the team made the Hall of Fame. But at the center of it all, always, was Wayne Gretzky. He was the key catalyst, the best player and the team leader, and the reason why the Edmonton Oilers hold a unique place in NHL history. It's no coincidence that talent followed wherever Gretzky went. Of course, every player in the league would want to play with the best. But Gretzky also elevated the abilities of everyone around him, as his unmatched playmaking skill created offense for everybody. Numerous different franchises iced their best squads of all time in the 80s and 90s, and at the center of those incredible squads was Wayne Gretzky. Because of all his NHL accomplishments, it's easy to overlook just how impactful Gretzky was on international ice. International competitions, while important as always, have kind of taken a back seat in the modern NHL, as players haven't participated in the Olympics, and the World Cup of Hockey hasn't evolved to be an appropriate substitute. Wayne Gretzky's biggest impact internationally came in a related, but separate, discontinued competition. The Canada Cup was the first attempt to establish an international tournament where NHL players were eligible to play, and where fans could get to see true best-on-best international action. The event took place on 5 separate occasions, and Wayne Gretzky participated in 4 of them. The first time Gretzky played in the tournament was in 1981. Throughout all these Canada Cup tournaments, one rivalry is remembered above all else: the Soviet Union. Throughout much of this era, was the only international team that truly rivaled Canada. The Soviet team didn't have the name recognition that much of Team Canada did, but they were just as talented, or maybe even more so. In the 81 tournament, they proved that to be true, as the Soviet Union ripped Canada apart 8-1 in the final. Wayne Gretzky led the tournament in scoring, but Soviet goalie Vladislav Tretiak took home MVP with a series of excellent performances. When the Canada Cup rolled around again in 1984, the Soviets were again dominant. They went 5-0-0 in the tournament's round robin, facing their toughest matches against Sweden and the United States. Because of Canada's 4th place finish, it worked out that the matchup between the two was going to take place in the semifinals. Canada managed to overcome the Soviet Union in a 3-2 overtime victory, with Mike Bossy slotting home the winner. Canada then dispatched Sweden in the 2-game final round, claiming the nation's 2nd title in the tournament and Gretzky's 1st. Gretzky again led the tournament in scoring and again lost out on MVP, as the award went to Islanders forward John Tonelli. With the tally set at 1-1 between Team Canada and the Soviet Union, that set the stage for the 1987 Canada Cup. Maybe the most iconic international hockey tournament of all time, the 1987 Canada Cup is remembered for featuring both Gretzky and Mario Lemieux together in their primes and an unbelievable best-of-3 final series. Unlike other years, no one nation dominated the round robin. As expected though, Canada and the Soviet Union exited the preliminary round as number 1 and number 2. Each team won by 2 goals against their semifinals opponent, and the 2 powerhouses were primed to face off in the finals yet again. Team Canada was absolutely stacked. In addition to the 2 best hockey players of all time, the team featured the likes of Mark Messier, Doug Gilmour, Ray Bourque, and Larry Murphy. The Soviets were no slouches either though, because while Gretzky and Lemieux would occupy the 1 and 2 slots in scoring, numbers 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were all Soviet. The Red Machine was an apt nickname for such an exceptionally talented and balanced squad. Both sides hated the idea of the other team taking home the gold, and neither was going to go down easy. Game 1 opened to a rough start for Canada. Shortly after beginning the second period, the Soviet Union were leading 4-1. Canada fought back, as Gretzky and Bourque were instrumental in pushing the game to 5-4, before a late goal sent the game to overtime. It would have been a storybook comeback, but it wasn't to be. Alexander Semak scored 5 minutes into overtime to give Game 1 to the Soviet Union. 2 first-period assists from Wayne Gretzky ensured Canada's confidence to win Game 2, as they entered Period 2 up 3-1. The script was flipped on Canada though, because this time they were victims of a comeback against them. Despite Gretzky's 4 assists, the game entered overtime, again tied at a score of 5-5. Midway through the second overtime period, Canada was able to force a scramble in front of the net. Lemieux found the puck, and Canada knotted the series at 1 apiece. This was it. The stakes had never been higher. It was the biggest and most important game for both international teams, 2 superstar squads that had been about as evenly matched as possible. As the 2 teams lined up to kick off that final game, everybody knew that one way or another, this game would be special. The first 3 goals belonged to the Soviets, then the next 2 to the Canadians. 4 more goals followed in the second period, and Canada led 5-4 ahead of the final 20 minutes. Another clutch goal from Semak late in the third made another overtime look likely, but only minutes before that, it was all over. Lemieux from Gretzky, in what goes down as one of the most iconic hockey goals of all time. That goal proved definitively who the global hockey superpower was. Canada took home their 3rd Canada Cup title. Wayne Gretzky again held the tournament scoring lead and finally took home his tournament MVP. An MVP here, a scoring title there. We've heard a lot about Gretzky's awards and accolades, but it's tough to really understand how much he's won without it all laid out in front of us. While we were just talking about international success, we only covered the Canada Cup. We didn't even talk about all of it either, because in 1991, Gretzky and the Canadians won it yet again. Outside of that tournament, Wayne Gretzky played in the World Juniors, 2 separate World Cup of Hockey tournaments, and the Olympics. Combining the 4 tournaments, Gretzky netted 3 medals, 1 silver, 2 bronze, and 42 points in 30 games. Back to the NHL, the most esteemed individual award that can be won is the Hart Trophy. Gretzky's won that award more than anyone in NHL history, claiming the trophy 9 times. He played 20 seasons in the NHL, meaning that 45% of his time spent in the NHL was an MVP season. His entire time in Edmonton, aside from his very first season, Gretzky was the reigning MVP. Prior to 2024-25, Wayne Gretzky has more seasons as the league's most valuable player than Auston Matthews has seasons in the NHL total. It's hard to contextualize things any better than that as to just how often Gretzky was the best. Gretzky has 10 Art Ross trophies to his name, always on the top among the highest scoring eras in NHL history. 7 of those were won consecutively, which on its own would be more than anyone else in NHL history. The Rocket Richard Trophy was established after Gretzky's goal-scoring days were long behind him, so officially, he's never won the award. Unofficially, he should have 5 of those in his cabinet. The only players who've led the NHL in goals more than him are Phil Esposito, Bobby Hull, and Alexander Ovechkin. He's led the NHL in assists 16 times, and points per game 11 times, and even shorthanded goals 5 times. He was an 18-time NHL All-Star, earning a selection on every team he ever played on. Aside from all of these, there's certain accolades that are reserved for the greatest player ever, honors that only Wayne Gretzky can possess. The most famous of these is his jersey number retirement. On October 1st, 1999, Gretzky's number 99 was raised to the rafters in Edmonton and retired officially league-wide. It was a unique number that Gretzky had made his own throughout the course of his career, and the NHL saw fit to ensure that nobody else would ever wear it again. This made Gretzky the first and only player to receive this honor, and one of only 3 in all of professional sports to be recognized in this fashion, joining the MLB's Jackie Robinson and the NBA's Bill Russell. He was also named to the Hockey Hall of Fame immediately after his retirement, waiving their normal waiting period. Gretzky wasn't the first to be honored this way, but has been the last, as the procedure was amended to maintain the prestige of such an accomplishment. If all these other accomplishments and accolades weren't enough to make him stand out, the NHL themselves identified Gretzky as the greatest player in their history. In a 2001 article, the league itself deemed him the greatest, comparing his offensive talent and dominant impact to the likes of Michael Jordan, Pelé, and Muhammad Ali. Whether you're a casual or hardcore hockey fan, if you know anything about the sport on any level, you probably don't need any convincing. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. There are counter-arguments that can be made, flaws that can be nitpicked, but in the end, there's really just no denying the fact that he's the greatest to ever do it. Nobody has scored like him. Nobody has created like him. Nobody has won like him, and nobody has even come close to being dominant like he has, at every single level of the game, from since he was a child in Brantford until he retired, a legend in New York. He has the most awards of all time, the most goals of all time, the most assists of all time, the most points of all time, and is one of the most purely talented athletes ever in professional sports. As time goes on, some of those records are going to begin to fall. Some of his accomplishments might begin to look less and less impressive, as the game evolves and people finally begin to catch up a bit. But it's going to be a long time, maybe forever, before anyone begins to come close to touching the overall legacy of Wayne Gretzky.